Hey, this is Michael Emery. Thanks for tuning into the Slow Baja. This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches, and hands down, my favorite tequila. Slow Baja is brought to you by the Baja XL Rally. The Baja XL is the largest and longest amateur off-road rally on the Baja Peninsula. It's 10 epic days, LA to Cabo to LA. Check it out at bajaxl.org. It's Michael Emery from Slow Baja, and I am delighted to be in Riverside, California today with motorcycle racing legend Malcolm Smith. Hello, Malcolm. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Michael. I want to talk about Baja.
Well, I'm delighted because it's something that I have a deep affinity for, and you've spent an awful lot of time there, and it sounds to me like you're still deeply passionate for the place.
Absolutely.
So you said on the first page of your book, for me, few things beat waking up in the morning during a Baja ride and watching the sun come up over the Sea of Cortez.
Yes. We have a little house there, and our bedroom's on the second floor, and the sun shines right in, big windows, and just watch the day come.
So before we jump into racing and your success on motorcycles, I found it interesting reading about your family. Tell me a little bit about your mother and your father.
Well, my mother was a teacher in Provo, or Salt Lake City, Utah, and she was on a vacation, and she booked on a freighter in Sitka, Alaska. She got off the freighter and was on the dock, and actually it was Skagway, not Sitka. And my father was there. At that time, not my father, but he was down there to meet a friend coming in on the same boat. The friend didn't come in. They got to talking, and he invited her to go on a hike to the top of the peak. Told her it was a beautiful view, and anyway, she went top of the peak with him, got married the next day.
That's an amazing story. Now, your father was quite an adventurer.
Yep, he was 81 when they got married.
He was 81, and your mom thought he was how old?
Oh, thought he was probably about 50. Yep.
What do you think you inherited from that?
I think the sense of adventure. My mother was real adventuresome, too. After my father died, she would still do things, camping trips. We did a trip to San Quintin when I was 13 years old. That's when I fell in love with Baja.
And I think it was about when you were 13 years old, you also fell in love with the Lambretta.
That's right. I was going to junior high school and walking home from school. There was a garage open with a motor scooter all apart. And one day there was a guy in the garage, and I talked to him. I said, "Would you sell it?" He said, "Yeah, I'll sell it for $50. So I got busy mowing lawns and any chores I could do to make a little money in the neighborhood. Got the $50 together, went to buy it, and he said, "Nope, I don't want to sell it." I changed my mind. I was brokenhearted. And my mother said, "Let's go downtown. There's a motorcycle dealer downtown San Bernardino, and he has Lambretta motor scooters." I went down there, and John Burr was the guy, and he taught me how to ride it in the alleyway behind the store. And I sat in the front, he sat on the back. He worked the controls, showed me how to do everything. And I said, okay, now you do it.
And you did it.
Yep.
And what was it like, that first feeling of having that freedom and that machine?
It just opened my horizons. Before I could go as far as I could ride my bicycle or hike. And the scooter made a big difference. And then I in those days, 14 years old, you could get a farm license. So I got a license and rode all the fire roads in San Bernardino Mountains. And
how soon did you just, was there a voice inside you saying, go faster, Malcolm, go faster?
Well,
was there ever a period where you were cautious?
probably not. A friend of mine, a neighbor, he was John Moreland. He was the same age as I was. And his mother, he kept hounding his mother and father until they bought him a Lambretta too. So when you have two, you always race. You know, he had the competitive instinct, and I did too. So everywhere we went, it was race speed.
And that quickly led to, was it a matchless that came after that?
Yes.
Was that again in parts?
No, it was a 49 matchless, and it was chained up to a telephone pole. And I kept looking at it and thought it was really neat looking. Had a great big front wheel, 21-inch front wheel, and a little leather seat, kind of high handlebars. And it was $175. So I sold the Lambretta and bought the matchless.
And you were about how old then?
14, probably 15.
So you'd had the Lambretta a year or so, maybe a little longer.
Maybe 2 years.
All right.
Yep.
And survived.
Yep. And the matchless just gave me a bigger range of exploring, bigger gas tank, higher speed.
And how soon did the accident start?
Well, I really didn't have very many accidents. I fell down on the Lambretta a few times, just spin out, hit the ground, skinned my elbows. The matchless.
It took some work to keep that going. I think that bike had been ridden a little bit hard and maybe needed some love and care, and
needed parts.
And you learned a lot about it.
It needed parts. So I went down to Mott Cycle in San Bernardino, and I would dig through the trash can, get old chains, tires, tubes, parts. And that was my routine. Get done with school, go down and dig through the trash can to keep my matchless running.
And what did Pappy Mott think about that?
Well, he kept kidding me. He said, I ought to hire you. So anyway, he hired me. I think I got 25 cents an hour, and I washed parts in gasoline. I can't believe it now how dangerous that was. We had magnetos that if you spun them, it would make a spark. And we're a couple of gallon can of gas and just working, washing it with brushes. And I can't believe I didn't ignite myself.
Probably not great to breathe all that gasoline either.
No.
Day after day.
No.
Well, you survived. And you learned a lot from Pappy Mott, I think.
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that and a little bit about
Well,
him.
one day he threw away a bunch of his catalogs. New catalogs had come out with motorcycle parts in it. And I took them home just to look at them. And I saw that he was maybe doubling his money on everything he's selling. If he sold a tire for $10, he paid $5 for it. And so a few days later, I said, Pappy, you're a crook. You take the people's money, double your money what you bought it for. And he said, come and look. I'm going to show you something. He showed me a part. Then he showed me, okay, my employees, my rent. He had all his expenses. And instead of making $5 on that tire, he made like 45 cents.
So you learned a very good lesson about how business really works.
Yep, and then we were one of the first Honda dealers in the U.S. And the mechanics didn't like Japanese motorcycles. They called them Jap junk. They had Harleys and Triumphs and Maxises. They didn't realize that Japan was going to eat their lunch with a better product. Anyway, we'd get these little Honda 50s in crates. Mechanics didn't want anything to do with them. And so when everybody would go home at night, I'd put maybe 10 of them in a circle. I'd grab a wrench to put the foot peg on. I put one foot peg on every one shift lever on one. I production lined it. And I was usually done an hour and a half, 2 hours. And the mechanics would say, how long did you work last night? Oh, it was 1 in the morning. I didn't want them to know I was making a lot more money than they were.
As a kid?
Yeah.
Wow. So you've learned a little bit about business early on from Pappy Mott, and you're feeding your hunger to learn about motorcycles and racing. When did you first start racing?
I think I was 16.
1957.
Yeah. And I had, the mattress I had a rigid frame, no suspension, really rough riding. By the way, I got that bike back from the guy I sold it to 50 years ago.
Wow.
I have it at the store.
I'm looking forward to stopping in at the store and seeing the museum on my way back to Los Angeles.
Good.
So, well, let me ask you, because my parents were really against motorcycles and really afraid of how I was going to hurt myself. What did your mom think? 1955, 56, 57, San Bernardino. I mean, motorcycling didn't have, it was still Marlon Brando and the Wild Ones, and it was the birth of the Hells Angels out there. So it must not have been the nicest people like you met on Hondas years later, right?
Well, some of the people, yes. Some of the Hells Angels looked pretty bad.
Did your mom, was your mom really against the whole motorcycling thing and hanging out at the shop, or was she happy that you were busy and you were working and you had something that you know, fed you, that fed your soul?
I think she was fairly happy. Then my stepfather came on the scene, and she and he had been engaged in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was Chinese. His family came over and were coolies building the railroad. And when they joined the Golden Spike, hooked the train tracks together, they fired all the coolies. A lot of them went back to San Francisco, but a lot of them stayed in Salt Lake City. And my stepfather's parents started a doll hospital where they repair dolls. You know, dolls were mostly wooden carved faces and handmade, and they'd get passed down to the younger siblings. And so they had a shop where they put new clothes on them, painted them, and fixed them up. My stepfather was a sports editor in the Salt Lake Tribune, and his one brother was the editor of the Salt Lake Tribune. The other brother was a surgeon, and the other brother or sister was a doctor.
Wow.
So a very successful family.
Very successful.
And I rebelled against him at first, but he taught me a lot about business. He loaned me the money to get started in business, and he'd go to the races with me.
And you seem to take business more seriously when you were young, more seriously than your racing.
Well, I knew it made more sense in my life. You know, there's a few racers in those days that made a decent living, but not many. Now, it's a whole different story. I mean, the motocross kids are getting $1 million or $2 million or $5 million.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So you worked your way up from washing parts at Pappy Mott's to work. Was K&N next door?
No, they were in Riverside. I hit my best friend head on. We were out riding in the hills in the evening. Two of us came down the hill. You had to go. There was a flood control project, and to get around the fences, you had to go up the steep hill, kind of down the other side. My friend and I, we waited and waited, and Mike, my other friend, didn't come, so we went back to look for him. Well, there was a blind rise, and we hit head on, and it hit my leg right here, and the femur and tibia. It broke my tibia in about 7 places, lost pieces of bone, and broke my femur. Anyway.
There was quite a concern and some thought of amputation, from what I've read about that. And your mother wasn't going to have it.
No, she didn't want any. We were a Kaiser Health member, and she started checking with Kaiser, and she found a doctor, young doctor that just graduated in where they do bone grafts. Take bones out of your hip, graft them into your missing pieces. And so they saved my leg.
Long, awful recovery.
Yep, I had
almost a full body cast. Yeah.
Yep, body cast on my back for 2 months. Yep, and then
So you got away from motorcycles for a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And into hot rods.
And then, my stepfather, he had bought a 39 Ford sedan, and it was a metallic red, beautiful car, and he'd kept it in the garage the whole time, and he brought it from Salt Lake to San Bernardino and gave it to me. And we would, a lot of friends of mine, we'd go out camping weekends, and we started fire roading the car, thinking it was a Pikes Peak hill climb. And anyway, tore it up eventually.
But learned how to drive sideways, I guess.
Yep. And actually, one of the front drum on the brake, it was mechanical brakes, not hydraulic. The drum broke, so we just disconnected that wheel from the braking system. So when you put on the brake, it would pull to one side. We drove it that way for a while, but there were some roads in the orange groves in those days. East Highlands was all orange trees, and we would take turns driving it, who could drive the fastest through this maybe 3-mile course. We took a few orange trees down.
So, from what I've gathered, you stayed away from motorcycles for a little bit during this recovery period where you were basically on a gurney with this almost complete body cast, 2/3 of your body in a cast, but you were still fiddling with fixing parts and fixing things. I guess you had a lot of time on your hands.
I did, but I took it bent my mattress about a 40-degree angle, bent it in the middle where the impact was. So I took it all apart. My friend that I hit, he took the frame down to, I think it was Buchanan's in Los Angeles, and they had the jigs and everything. They straightened it out. I put it back together on a gurney.
Amazing.
And then I was afraid to ride it. I was scared of it. I sold it and bought it. I don't know, I traded it. A guy had driven down from Oregon, and he had a Lincoln. No, it was a Mercury. I think a 53 Mercury. And I traded him the motorcycle for the Mercury. But then I went back to work for Pappy Mott.
I'm not sure if we mentioned earlier, so we'll cover it again here. You went back to Pappy Mott after your accident, but Pappy Mott had a wooden leg from his accident as a
speedway rider
when they raced
board
on board track. Yeah.
Yeah. There was the auto parts store right next door to Pappy Mott, and the guy that owned it was real sharp, and he liked that I was interested in business, and so he'd help me and tell me things. Anyway.
So you ended up, we're going to fast forward a little bit here, you ended up getting back into motorcycling. You couldn't stay away.
There was a family in Hawaii, that Schuberts, the whole family raced. There was about 2 generations of them. And they traded in a 53 Matchless at Pappy's, and I bought that from him. Started riding that, and then I wanted a new bike. They had a leftover on the floor, and he sold me that credit. I had to make payments for it, but I left the store to go home one evening, and there was a park on the way home, and it had some curves, windy road through the park, and I used to go as fast as I could go. Well, I didn't realize that new tires had wax on them.
So this is a brand new bike.
Brand new bike. I had this mold release, and I rode about a mile until I got to the curvy road, laid it down the first corner and slid all the way across with the handlebars, foot peg, me underneath it.
Brand new bike.
Yeah, brand new bike.
Freshly healed body.
Yeah.
Well, you had some success as a local racer, and then one day, Edison Dye walks into your life.
Yep.
Can we jump fast forward right through all that racing that we're not even going to talk about, but you were damned successful on local stuff, Southern California, Hare and Hounds, and here and there.
I'll tell you one short story.
Please do.
Moreno Valley, they had a motorcycle guys that made different tracks up and down the hills and through the little canyons and a little bit of everything. They'd maybe 10-mile loops, and they'd do 5 loops. The first race, I went out there, and I thought, just go wide open. It's the trick to winning races. So I went wide open. First turn, I took out about 4 other guys, and some older guy came over and said, "Stupid kid, what are you doing?" Anyway, I went home driving. I had a El Camino. On the way home, I started thinking, I fell off about 7 times. If I hadn't fallen off, I'd have won the race. So I went back a month later and didn't fall off, slowed down a little, and actually speeded up.
And that was quite a revelation, slowing down to speed up.
Yeah. I've had that problem all my life, want to go too fast.
Well, this is the name of my podcast is Slow Baja, and I have not had the machinery or the ability to go as fast, and so I'm looking at you, and I'm in deep admiration of somebody who had to slow down to go fast enough to win. Yeah. You were going so fast that you were keeping yourself from winning by going too fast. If you slowed down, you could win, which is quite a revelation.
Yeah, I have young guys now that I try to explain that to.
Can you tell me a little bit about your internal drive, since we're talking about slowing down? Can you tell me about your internal drive and where your mind goes when you get into that racing zone? All those things coming together on a motorcycle, so many inputs coming into your brain, your vision, your hearing, the road. Where does your mind go?
I love that feeling, that adrenaline high when you're using all your sight, all your ability, your balance, your calculation. You have to make a quick decision, like going down a dirt road in Baja and coming over a rocky rise. You don't know what's over the hump, but you have to make a decision quickly or crash. And
makes you feel very alive, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
When you get it right.
Yeah, when you get it right. And I've gotten it wrong a couple of times. I broke my femur in Baja 500 race.
Here at Slow Baja, we can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser south of the border. And when we go, we'll be going with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Check them out at bajabound.com. That's bajabound.com, serving Mexico travelers since 1994. Hey, Baja tourism is picking up, and our friends at the Animal Pad and Tap Act want to remind you when you're crossing the border, just say no to puppy peddlers. I know they're cute, but the sooner we can end the demand, we can end the supply. For more information, check out theanimalpad.org and Tap Act on Instagram and Facebook. Well, let's get to the 6th day in Sweden, which then led to you rooming with, was it Bud Eakins you were rooming with?
Yes.
And he told you about the upcoming Baja race in '67, the NORRA.
I think it was Polish 6 days.
Sorry, yeah, right. You were in '66. You were in Sweden, and the next year you were in Poland, and you won that 6th day in Poland, correct?
Well, I won a gold medal.
You won a gold medal.
And Bud told me about the race coming up. I came back. Maybe we should tell a story about Edison Dye.
Well, I was going to say, so Edison Dye and the Husqvarna.
Yeah. And by this time, I had bought the service.
You were at K&N, and you took on partnership and ended up with the service department.
Yes. Yeah, we Kenny and Norm, I was going to leave and go back to work for Poppy Mott. And they said, no, you stay, you'll be a partner. So they made me a partner. But they kind of stopped work.
After they convinced you to drop out of college to be a partner, and they had this other air cleaner thing going on.
Yeah. Anyway, they're still good friends of mine. But I bought the service department home. I bought a heliarc welder, aluminum welder, taught myself how to use it, and there was nobody in town with a Heliark in those days. So I got Volkswagen engines and cases and stuff from all kinds of places. I do the welding, and I wait on the counter. And one day, a guy sticks his head in the window and said, "Who's Malcolm Smith here?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "I want to hire you to race my Swedish motorcycles. I'm going to be the importer of them, and I brought 2 of them over here. I want you to go race them." I went out. He had the Husky in the back of the pickup, and I was racing Greaves motorcycles from England. I argued with him how much better the Greaves were than the Husky. Big aluminum frame. He said, "Well, just come out and ride it. Let's go riding. Where can you ride around here?" I said, "Well, Rattlesnake Mountain. There's a bunch of tracks out there." And we went, unloaded the motorcycle, started it up, rode 1 lap of this motocross kind of course we had, and I pulled right up to him. I said, "You've hired yourself a rider." It was so much better than the old Greaves. The Swedes are great at simplifying everything. And they use Swedish steel, and just a great product. And I realized the opportunity of being a dealer. So I said, "I'll race it, but you have to make me a dealer." So I was the first dealer in the U.S. There was another dealer in Burbank. He and I were at the same time dealers. And I bought a little Dodge van, and I filled it with parts for Huskies, tires and chains. And I'd go to the desert races. I'd sell parts, then I'd go race, and then I'd sell parts before I went home.
Well, it sounds like Edison Dye was a very smart man.
He was really sharp. He did tours, BMW motorcycle tours in Europe. He had, I don't know, 20 or 25 motorcycles. And he took American tourists over, and he had all this layout everywhere. They'd go to different hotels all over Europe.
Now tell us that story about he sent you to the 6th day in Sweden, but he flew you over to Norway and you had to pick up his van.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good story.
Well, when he was trying to talk me into riding Husqvarna, racing for them, he wasn't getting any headway. He said, "No, if you ride for me, I'll send you to the 6 days in Sweden." So that convinced me that I should be on a Husky. And before I was going to, I was waiting for the tickets. They wouldn't come, and I'd call him, and he'd say, "Oh, pretty soon, pretty soon." And then he finally said, when the last day, he said, "I'll meet you at the LA airport. I'll have a ticket for you." So I get to the airport. He's got a ticket, all right, but it's to Oslo, Norway. And he said, "I have one of my tour luggage Volkswagen vans in the parking lot of the airport there, and you have to drive that to Sweden." I got there about 2 in the morning. It's raining like mad. I have a motorcycle gear bag, and he didn't know what color it was. He just gave me the keys.
And didn't know quite where it was parked, I understand.
No, somebody else had parked it.
That was your job at
Yep.
2 a.m. in the rain.
Yep. And anyway,
How many vans do you think there were in that parking
I
lot?
tried the key in about 4 or 5 of them. In those days, probably half the cars were Volkswagen vans. And then in Norway, you drive on the right side of the road. In Sweden, you drive on the other side of the road in those days. Sweden's changed back to our style. But in those days, the college girls hitchhiked all over Europe. And if there were girls hitchhiking, I'd stop and pick them up. If there were guys there, I'd just keep going. And we had a kind of a roundabout. One needed to go to,
So you became a taxi.
yeah, kind of a taxi. It went out of the way a little bit. 2 of them have to go over here and another one there.
Were they surprised to see an American motorcycle racer driving in their country? They're pretty friendly people.
Yeah, and they spoke good English.
But it sounds somewhat innocent. You were a married guy and you had some important work to do.
Yep, I wanted to do the race. My timing was 8 hours difference than there. So I woke up and it was a bright sunny day. And
Yeah, so you had some jet lag.
Yep,
And they have 24-hour sun there.
yep.
What time did you get up?
It was about 3 or 4 in the morning, but it was.
So did you have access to the garage, or did you just have to
No,
walk around?
I didn't. I just walked around. They had a executive hotel that was up on the hill, and they had big Swedish breakfast. And the next year, they had bought a castle from a family that had a big castle up on the hill. So that's where we got to stay in the castle.
Amazing.
The factory, there was a big lake there, Lake Veteran, and there was a river that fed it and had a waterfall, and they had a wheel,
Yeah, water wheel.
and it ran this big shaft down to the factory, and they would tap off to run the lathe or mill, and they made guns for the Allies and the Germans. They were neutral, but they made guns and cannons.
So that event got you on some terrain that was unlike anything you had ever ridden here in the desert, correct?
Boy, it sure was. Mud.
Mud and slippery stuff.
Yeah, mud and roots. And
You survived that, ended up with a silver medal if I've done my homework.
yes. I hit the ground many times. For that kind of riding, you have to have a lot of throttle control. You have to keep the wheel from spinning. And from desert racing, my method to win was just go full throttle because the ground was more traction.
Right. Well, we're going to fast forward. So next year you're back to the 6th day and won a gold medal.
Yeah.
And you roomed with your hero, and he told you about Baja.
Yes, he told me about Baja, the race that's going to happen.
And in those days, 1967, NORRA was a brand new thing, but didn't Bud and his brother, hadn't they done a speed run, set a record on down all the way?
Yes, Billy Robinson, he was a Honda dealer, and Dave Eakins. I don't think Bud rode the first ride. I'm not sure.
I think you're right. I think he didn't ride the first one. Those are facts I should have straight away. So he told you about Baja, and you thought, why not?
I thought, well, boy, that would be fun. because I had been down there with my mother when I was 13. And anyway, I had to talk Edison Dye into giving me a motorcycle. And I think he paid the entry fee.
And you did an awful lot of homework with this little book that I brought. You had the Lower California guidebook.
Coolheart and Garrett.
Yeah, and again,
That's a treasure.
Your preparation really, I think, probably helped set you up. Obviously, you had a great bike and great skills, but you were very well prepared about roads and where to go. Tell me a little bit about your partner on that ride.
Yes, J.N. Roberts.
He seems to have gone on to some fame in his life.
Yes, he did. He was a really good rider. He still lives in Montana and rides.
But Jan didn't do his homework.
No, I kept telling him, read the book, figure it out. You can miss. There's some turns. You have to take the right turn. Anyway, he missed the turn into San Ignacio. He kept going straight to Santa Rosalia. Got there, was out of gas, found a fisherman. It was now midnight. Got some gas, came back and went back out to the west coast. And he just felt lost.
Missed again.
Yeah, and he laid down under a cactus, slept for a while until somebody came by. It was Vic Wilson,
Yeah, in a Manx, right.
Yep, and he just followed him into the finish line.
So for a 1-2, you were number one in bikes and they were number one in cars.
Yeah. But when they had the race started at the bullfight ring in Tijuana, and they said the first vehicle will be at the halfway point, El Arco, at 6 the next morning. I was there 5 the night before. I was like 12 hours ahead of what they expected.
So was obviously there wasn't an arch. They weren't ready for you.
No, they weren't ready. And
did you have to go looking for the officials? How did you handle that?
No, they were camping in the area. It was a little village. There was still a Catholic church there, and everybody was kind of hanging around there.
So they didn't realize how fast the bikes were.
No,
they had no idea.
No.
Or how fast you were on the bike.
Well, we'd put a big gas tank on, Triumph gas tank, and a friend of mine, he was, I think, about 16 years old, and we bought a little Volkswagen, stripped it down, took the fenders off.
A little Beetle.
Yep. And he carried 5-gallon cans of gas and left them at Rancho.
For you to pick up and fill up.
And the first one was El Rosario. And, it was supposed to be at the first house as you come into the village. I knocked on the door. No gasoline. The old lady answered the door. No. So I went to the next house. No. So I went back to the first house. When she opened the door, I just kind of walked by her, went to the back porch, and there was my can of gas. Ran back out and filled it up just as John Barnes on his Triumph came through. But I hadn't pre-run or anything. We just read the guidebook and decided where we'd stash.
So I think that's the amazing thing now, to see where that event has gone in the 50 years since then, 50 plus years since then. Imagine that you could just look at a guidebook, send a buddy down with a Volkswagen Beetle full of 5-gallon cans, and you finished, you won. You never had a chance to pre-run, it just boggles my mind compared to what people are doing today.
Yes. The amount of money they're spending.
Flying and pre-running and pre-running and GPS and all that. Yeah. Did you have any techniques to help you memorize things, or did it just come naturally to you?
It came natural to me.
It must have helped you immensely to be able to have these facts and figures and where to go and deal with the fatigue and the pain and whatever else you're doing at speed and still be able to remember.
When I got off the bike at the halfway point, I hadn't drank very much, and I couldn't talk. I was so dried out, dehydrated. But I have an imprint of a race course 20 years ago. I could go down and repeat it. It's just...
it's locked in your mind.
Yeah.
It's locked in your mind. Well, you've been generous with making some time and telling me some stories, and I won't stay all day, but I do have a few more questions for you. From that first Baja run in 1967 to now you have a house there. How many wins? You had was it 2 in motorcycles, 3 in motorcycles, and 3 in cars?
Yeah.
3 and 3.
I think so.
You're like the John Surtees of off-road.
Oh.
You had 2-wheel and 4-wheel wins.
Yeah.
And if I understand it correctly, you ended up in a buggy because you broke your leg on a photo shoot with the LA Times, who was doing a story about you on your previous win.
That's right. Yeah. Shav Glick.
Famous Shav Glick.
Yeah.
Got to know him a little bit in the 80s.
And we were out shooting. Should I tell a story about?
Sure, please.
Well, they had Vic Wilton brought the buggy out, and then we went to the same place that I test rode, the Husky, Rattlesnake Mountain. The sun was going down, and the photographers had to hurry and get some pictures before they lost the light. So I was at the bottom of this hill, and I said, go up on top of the hill, and you can shoot there when I jump off. Well, there'd been a flash flood, and there was a big canyon, so I jumped up the hill, smacked right into the other side of the canyon, and my leg got between the motorcycle and the bank.
Now, was this a leg that you had previously broken?
Yes. Another had to have plates put in. Yep.
So from that, you said, well, I'm not going to miss Baja. I'm going to build a buggy.
Yep. There was a company here in Riverside. They built Volkswagen engines, Revmaster, and they were the sponsor. And they bought the frame, and the friend that I had sent down with the gasoline, he and I put the buggy all together. And he drove with me too. And I learned another, never quit. We were in the race, and we were at the LA Bay turnoff, where it turns off. And I hit a big hole, and the front wheel flew off. In those days, the Volkswagen had a hollow spindle on the front to drive the speedometer cable. So the right side spindle was very weak. And I didn't know it. You're supposed to put a Porsche spindle in there. That fixed it. Well, anyway, the wheel flew off, and we found our way into Punta Prieta, and there was a bunch of old cars laying around there. There was an old Volkswagen. I could have taken it apart, taken the spindle off, put it on, and won the race again, because I think I had about our lead, but just gave up.
So never give up has been your motto,
Yep.
and slow down to go fast enough to win.
Yeah.
So you've developed some affinity for the place. You've developed some affinity for the people. Can you talk a little bit about that? What the people and the place means to you? Again, you've been to Africa. You've been all over Europe. We haven't even talked about on any Sunday. You're an international film star. That film's almost 50 years old, and people are still talking about it. It's amazing to me. And here you are. We're talking about our next door neighbor here, Baja. What does it mean to you?
It's just the freedom. If we want to go ride our dirt bikes, we can ride them side by side, get on the sea-doos, go down the coast. And I have a good habit or bad habit, but if there's a road that turns off, I want to go down to the end of it. And we've found some amazing things down there.
I've read about that. You're very curious. You're flying from the air. You're always looking. When you're out and about on the dirt, you're always looking.
My son-in-law is the pilot, and my wife is too. So.
I just want to stay on Baja for a little bit here. You've developed a foundation, and you have an orphanage that you're involved with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's in Valley, Trinidad, and we pay any ongoing education that kids want. Like if they want to go to boarding school in mainland Mexico, we pay all their expenses. And we have one, he's a dentist now, he's graduated dental school, and he's going to take 2 more years to be an oral surgeon. And he just sent us a beautiful video he did of his self. And
you raise money for the foundation through your charity rides.
Yes.
Do I have that correct?
Yes, we have some big donors. We have one, Don Mackey. He used to be a GMC truck dealer in Tucson, and he hits up all his suppliers, his insurance brokers, finance people, and makes a very big contribution. And all the riders contribute a little.
Well, you're nearing in 80 years old here, if I'm correct, right? You're a little bit. You're
78.
What do you think about when you look back and say, "Wow, this was my life"?
Oh, there's a few things I'd do over differently, but I have great kids and great grandkids, and there's still too many places I want to see and go do. I love Africa. I love the backcountry of Africa.
And you raced the Paris Dakar, which is a whole nother crazy thing.
Yeah, it sure is.
In Land Rovers, correct?
Yeah, I have a infinity for old Range Rovers. I've got 4 of them out in the backyard there.
Maybe you can show me before I head out. Yeah, I drive a 50-year-old Land Cruiser around Baja, 1971.
6-cylinder.
6-cylinder FJ40, totally stock, just an old-fashioned lump of a machine, but it's a beautiful old
They are.
Portal to another era. It's like your old bikes. It just takes you back to an older, simpler time.
Well, the Range Rovers ride fairly smooth because they have a lot of wheel travel. And anyway,
with the advancements in motorsports and the speeds, did you ever want to get in a trophy truck or a new buggy and really tear it up?
Oh yes,
that never abates. That feeling's always there.
Bud Feldkamp and I built that Bel Ray Bullet, and that was the state of the art in those days. And then I drove Pernelli Jones's Don Adams bought Pernilli's the Blazer.
Mm-hmm. The Bronco.
No, the Blazer.
Oh, the Blazer.
The Blazer later. And I drove that, and that you could win overall on that. It went so fast down the roads, the wind buffeting you, and the buggies are going maybe 90 and you're going 125.
You had mentioned it at one point that you admired a friend of yours. You would be fretting on your way home from a race if you didn't win. And you would be fretting and beating yourself up about you could have done this, you could have done that, and he's just all smiles. He finished 12th or 15th or what have you. If you can't win an overall or first place, does it really, really tear you up?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
It did.
But for how many
when
years?
I was younger, yeah. I had a very good co-driver. It's Dr. Feldkamp.
So I met Bud in Mexico for the La Carrera back in 2000. I think it was 2008. He was racing with Bob Summerhour, and they had a kind of a crazy crash. But I got to meet those guys a little bit. Have seen him a couple times since then. But how did you, and he was a dental student, correct?
Yeah, I worked on his Husky motorcycle. He rode motocross. So
it seems to me things were simpler in that era in that if you found a guy who could share the expenses, you're an internationally known motorcycle racer at this stage, and he's a dental student, and the two of you got together and won in Baja.
Well, he has a winning instinct, too. He wants to win. Yeah, we just went to dinner with him a couple nights ago.
Well, he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
All right, well, Malcolm Smith, I can't say thank you deeply enough for making some time for the Slow Baja and telling me about your life and your affinity for the people of Baja. And you've got a place that's in Gonzaga Bay, yeah?
Yeah.
And do you get down there much?
We go about 6 times a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah. We have got a lot of friends to buy houses there. So now we have a lot of adventures. We'll do whale watching trips. We'll do the back roads on the 4x4s.
I think I saw a Volkswagen van out in your front yard here that's looks like it's Baja ready.
Yeah. My son built it, and then he gave it to my son-in-law. And he was going to take it to Baja, but he doesn't want it to rust up like it would down there.
And when you get down there, does the rust come right off of you? Do you feel, is there a new spring in your step? Is there a new feeling that comes over you when you get to Baja?
Yeah, there always is. And we've been doing that ride down there 25 years now.
How many people go on that with you?
We've been sometimes up to 70.
And do you still get on a bike and ride, or do you just get to make an appearance now?
My balance is not good enough.
I would think that's got to be a tough one.
I have a Honda-powered pre-runner I built, and I would chase. I had a rack on the back. I can put a motorcycle on top of it. So I was the rescue.
Well, thank you very much. It's been really a delight. Hey, you guys know what to do. Please help us by subscribing, sharing, rating, all that stuff. And if you missed anything, you can find the links in the show notes at slowbaja.com. I'll be back before you know it. And if you want to receive notices on new episodes, please follow Slow Baja on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for you old folks.